Hey, it's Bryant. I've been wanting to record this video to walk through because I've been getting a lot of questions about triggering Power Automate workflows from Canvas apps and Power Apps. Now, I'm somebody who, as much as I can avoid triggering a flow from Power Apps, I'm going to do so. And it probably is partly because when they first introduced this as a feature, it was so buggy and unreliable that I saved way more time by avoiding using a Power Automate workflow directly from a Canvas app. Of course, I love Flow and use it a lot on its own or in the background, but triggering it from the Canvas app is something I am having a hard time getting on board with. So this video today is me walking you through all the reasons that we should use caution when using a Power Automate workflow directly from a Canvas app. And hopefully at the end of this video, you'll have all the information. You can kind of make the decision yourself. But a lot of the things that I have issues with around this are centered around using solutions as well. So if you aren't using solutions, you can discard a lot of that piece. But I'm going to go from start to finish on what exactly you should think about before adding a flow directly inside a Canvas app. So what do I have here? And I've got a SharePoint list in the background. It's just got a title column. That's all I'm writing to. And here I've got in my app, I've connected to that SharePoint list. I've shown these items here in this gallery. And I've got a button that I'm going to use to trigger the flow. Just for our own sake, I'm going to select all of these ones that I've been testing around with as I prep for this video, delete them, and now I've only got one item. And for the app to then reflect those changes, I'll just come to the data source and refresh. So we can start by just seeing that we have only one item in here. Okay. So how do I create a Power Automate flow that triggers from my Canvas app? Over on this far left nav bar, they have now added the Power Automate logo here, the little icon. I can click it and actually create a workflow directly from this Canvas app. So I can click Create New Flow. It'll pop this nice pop-up modal for me, give me all the templates that I can choose from. But just click Create from Blank. This is going to be a very simple workflow. And what I'm going to do in this workflow is trigger from Power Apps to create an item in my list. Now, normally I'd say let's just patch that or use a form and submit the form. But some use cases where this may make sense is if we're going to do more than just write to the list. Okay, so if we're going to pass information from Power Apps to SharePoint, and we're going to do a lot of processing, a lot of conditions, and then write to the SharePoint item, it might make sense in that case. If we're going to then send emails or add a planner card to a planner board or connect to some other API, we'd want to do Power Automate for the majority of those things. Okay, so that's why you would maybe want to trigger a flow from your Power App. Here I've got the Power Apps trigger. There are no inputs for this as of yet. I can create a new step. And the step I'm going to create here is to create an item from share or in the SharePoint list. So I'll click SharePoint and scroll down and find create item. Two options here you have to give it is which list and which site. So my site is training videos lists and my list name is write to SharePoint from Flow. Then it'll add all the columns that I need to write to, and the only one I've got is title. I could click Ask in Power Apps and then would be passing a parameter from Power Apps into this, and that would be the title that Flow would be receiving from Power Apps and then writing. But instead, I'm just going to do test from Flow as the static name from here. And for this Flow, I'm going to rename it and call it underscore Flow called from PA. Okay, no spaces. That's it for me. So I'm going to save this. And we're quickly coming up to the very first point. I've got 6 main things I want to walk you through today. And the first one is that when we've got a flow that we're triggering from Power Apps actually has no awareness to what the flow is doing. So I'm going to click this button and in the onSelect property, now that I've got this flow over here, I'm going to start typing flow called from Power Apps, and you see it will auto-populate that name here, and it'll do a dot run and close the parentheses. If I was passing parameters, I'd put those inside the parentheses there, but I'm not. Okay, so all it needs to know is that I'm running it. If I do this, it's literally like me dropping a letter in the mail and saying, see you later. Power Apps has no idea what's happening in the flow, has no idea it's creating a new item. And we can see this if I click the play button here and I trigger this flow. We saw it, the button went gray as it triggered the flow, and then it stopped. And if I come to this list and refresh, you'll see the new item was created. And yet Power Apps didn't add that new item to my gallery here. Why is that? The gallery is referencing the list directly. And it's because Power Apps has no idea what just happened, right? So what we can do is we could come to the data source here and hit refresh, and that would then add that item to our gallery. But that may tempt you to then click this button and add in the semicolon and then add in a refresh statement where we type refresh, we add the SharePoint list name. If I were to do that and hit play here and run this button, it still didn't add in the third item that's now presumably been created. And if I come here and click refresh, I will have that third item here. It did not add it to my gallery. And why is that? Because Power Apps is calling the flow, triggering the flow, and then immediately moving to the next line of code. And the next line says to refresh. And so now we have this race to see, can Power Automate create that item before Power Apps refreshes? And in this case, Power Apps was faster and refreshed the connection to the data source before the flow finished creating the item. Okay? So you have to be aware of that. How would we get around it? Well, there's the thing I would probably recommend if you're going to go this route is that you include a step in your flow that responds back to the app. Okay? The way Power Apps does the code when triggering a Power Automate workflow is it will simply trigger it and then immediately move on to everything else. But if you need to wait for the flow to do whatever it's doing, you need to include this step, respond to a Power App or flow. And simply by adding that one step, it will wait on the Power Automate workflow to finish running before it will move on to any other steps. Okay? So I save that, close this. It gets angry for a second because it's refreshing and pulling that workflow definition back into the app. And as soon as it's done loading, it's going to be happy again, and we can then run this. Okay, so it's updated. Now we can try it. And if I hit play here and click here, it will then wait for it to create the item and then refresh my look at the data source. So now I can be guaranteed that every time I refresh, it will add in the new item. Okay, so that's number one to be aware of. Power Automate and Power Apps, terrible at talking to each other. You have to instruct them to interact. So adding that respond action is the only way for them to talk about what happened on the Power Automate side. Otherwise, Power Apps is just throwing it over the wall and doesn't care what happens next. Okay, that's the first one. The next one is that if I were to save and close this, you notice that I did not add any premium actions to my workflow. So what we've got here currently for this app is that it is a standard app. Even though we're calling and triggering a Power Automate workflow, it's considered a standard app. All right. If I come here and go to details, license designation for this app is standard. However, if I were to open this app up in edit mode, actually, we can probably just do the flow itself. So if I open up the flow, and this is the flow we created, and I edit it, and we add in a premium connector to the flow. So note that our Power App is just on top of SharePoint. Nothing premium there. But if I come here and add a premium step in here, let's say a Microsoft Dataverse step, where we list rows. Let's choose just a table, the accounts table. Since Dataverse is a premium action, and Flow Checker is going to say, you don't want to pull in this whole table. Since Dataverse is a premium action, suddenly the app becomes premium, all right? Because users have to trigger the flow and they need a premium license, and so that the connection flows its way through to the app, okay? So I want to show you that here. Adding this premium step, saving this flow, then we'll close it. We'll take a look again at the app and see if its designation has changed. All right, and now you see when I open up the information about the app, now that we've added that premium step to the flow, the app becomes premium. Okay, so that's number 2 thing to be aware of there. Number 3, I'll say, is that if you ever modify your flow outside the context of the app, so we can open our flow from within our app. If we open it outside of our app and make changes, it's possible that it breaks the connection to the app. So what you always need to do is if you make a change to the flow outside of the app, always open up the app and refresh that flow. You may have to delete it and re-add it to the app. Not delete the flow, but delete the connection to the flow, and that will re-jog its memory. Okay. Okay. Number 3 is that flows that are triggered from an app trigger in the context of the user who is triggering them. Okay, so let's say that I've created this app. It creates the item in SharePoint for me, but I'm expecting when I publish this that it will use my credentials because I don't want to share that SharePoint list with everybody at my org, but I want everyone to be able to use this app. Well, then, if I design it this way, I'm going about it completely the wrong way because every time somebody clicks a button in Power Apps to trigger a flow, it triggers it using their credentials. It will run it as them, right? There are some edge cases that you can get around this. You can toss in some child flows and get all fancy. But the way that this works out of the box is that, Karen Berg, who opens this app and clicks that button, it will try to write the list item as Karen Berg to the SharePoint list. And if we opened up the SharePoint list and we showed the column, if I go to show hide columns and I show the created by, whoever clicked that button, it would say it was created by them. It would be as if they created the item themselves. And for that reason, they have to have access to whatever data source that flow is writing to, okay? That can be a really hard concept for people to understand who are used to doing application development where you give someone an app and then you control completely what service account or anything is writing all this stuff in the background. That's not the same with Power Apps. Whoever triggers the flow writes the data, okay? So that's number 3. Number 4, let's take a look at adding this now to a solution. So if you're unfamiliar with solutions, I have a whole other video on solutions in Power Automate and Power Apps. But the idea with solutions is we developed this in our dev environment. We now want to move it into a production environment and make it managed so that nobody can modify it anymore, right? So I can come to solutions and create a new solution. I've got a solution here that I'm using already, but I'll just create a new one so I can show you this really quickly. I'll call it delete me so I remember to delete it right after I'm done with this video. In the drop down, I'm going to choose the default publisher, which is not best practice. Don't use the default publisher when you're doing your own solutions. I'll open up the solution, and you can always add items that you've created before. So I can click this button at the top that says add existing, and I can add in our existing app and then existing workflow. So I come here, click add existing, and I go to app, Canvas app, and I can choose from Dataverse or outside Dataverse. From Dataverse are ones that have already been added to solutions. Outside Dataverse are ones that haven't. And this testing right to Power Automate, this is the one I've been working on. I'm going to add this now to our solution. Now that adds the app. We also need to add the flow into the solution so that when we package it all together, we've got everything we need for the solution to actually work. So I click add existing, go to automation, Cloudflow. And here is where we run into our issue. Number 4 here is that you cannot add flows to a solution that are triggered from a Canvas app. You cannot add existing flows to a solution that were triggered from a Canvas app. You can click here to learn more. I've got that page already up. Here it says Canvas app instant flows must be created from an app already in a solution, since adding this from outside solutions is blocked. So where are we at now? Right now, we have to go back now and delete that flow we created and then open up the app from the solution and recreate it from within the solution. All right, so you cannot add flows to a solution that are triggered from a Canvas app when the Canvas app wasn't already in the solution. That's really important to know. Okay, issue number 5. is that we can have issues with people being able to run our workflows in the production environment from the Canvas app. It's kind of tricky, and I've seen errors all over the place when we get to production and we expect people to be able to run our flow. Okay, here's the app I've got in production. Now I've done some troubleshooting and eliminated the errors here. So you can see once I click the button here, it will add an item for me in SharePoint and refresh my look at the SharePoint list. So I've got these items now. This is in production. I've seen errors all over the place, and I'll point to this one here where it says the connection is not configured for this service. And the fix that everybody says to do is to add the ability to run workflows from the security roles of the environment. Now, I've never had that be the solution. What I've always seen it, the reason of this be, and you see here they've got the security role in the solution, and they're adding a read access for the organization to processes. I mean, this may work, but the issue that I've always seen is that the app holds on to a phantom flow. So if you did what we did and we created that workflow and then we tried to add the app and then remembered, oh, we can't add apps. We can't add flows to a solution that are triggered from a Canvas app. We have to create them from there, and you delete it and then you go and recreate it. Let me show you what that does. So here's the one that I've created in our dev environment, and I built it forward into production. But if I open up this solution and I take a look at the application, so the app here is trigger a flow test, and I go to details, it has a tab here called flows, and it actually has both flows in here, even though one of them no longer, this one actually doesn't even exist at all. I've deleted it from our whole environment, and yet it still hangs around here as a phantom flow that can cause issues. So come to the flows tab here and see this. If I open up this app to edit it, you'll see under the flows inside the app, it only lists this one flow. I have no idea why this hangs around. And if you take a look inside the code of this, there's still the reference to this flow, and you can't seem to get rid of it. All right, so that's another one. That would be number 5, is that the phantom flows hang around and cause problems. Okay, last one here. I published this version to our production environment. Okay, I'm in the default environment. This is production. I've opened this up, and let's say I'm a user. I'm using it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items here. I'm going to create another one. We'll make it 7. Okay, so I've got 7 items. I'm using this, and then somebody goes to fix a bug in the dev, exports this as a new solution, and what we're going to do now is I'm back in our target environment. The default, this is our production. I'm going to import the new version of the solution, and we'll see what happens while that's happening. Okay, I made a slight change to the workflow. I added in a 1-second delay in that workflow, and now I'm going to import that to our production environment. Okay, I'm going to hit import, and it started to import. So now I come back. I'm currently using the app. I hit that button, still works. Still works. All right, it took a little while to get here. That's because the solution was importing. If you have a production application that calls a flow, anytime you import a new version of that, it will cause errors for the users in the app. All right, there's no way around this. And so if you have added a flow to be triggered from a Canvas app, and it's in your solution, that's part of your solution, you are now only able to build to production when nobody is in the application. So think about that. If you're a global organization, you will always likely have somebody in that application. So that's going to really limit the times that you can build to production. Now, the way for me to get around this error, right, I'm going to keep seeing it until I refresh my app so that it grabs the most recent version of the app and the flow, and then it'll work again. But if I was in the app when that build happened, that's where I'm going to see all the errors. So those are the 6 issues. What do I normally do? I normally have somebody write to a table, and then I trigger flows off of the table, right? I don't like to have flows triggering from the app. There's sometimes where you have to and you can't get around it. These are the 6 reasons. why you should maybe pump the brakes and think about it before you jump in full steam on it. Thank you. Hope this was helpful to somebody out there. Have a good one.